Welcome. You're now listening to episode 119 from the Shed End, as always, with myself, Theo, and the other Theo. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. I've been enjoying a 4-day working week because I was given the Monday off, which is always nice. So can't complain. Looking forward to the weekend. I've got the Chelsea 2012 away kit on. Managed to find it in my cupboard at the very back. Actually, it's my brother's one. My one that had Torres on the back is too small for me now. So I stole my brother's, which is my size now. And I'll give a special shout out to whoever guesses whose name's on the back in the comments. Particular player. I'd say it's a fan's favourite at Chelsea, or was a fan's favourite at the time. But yeah, other than that, I'm good. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. You'll probably have to tell us by the end of the podcast, or maybe on the next podcast, actually. We'll start it with that. But yeah, no, I'm good. I'm good, thanks. It's been a good week, productive. Obviously good result against Newcastle. And yeah, it's been good. It's been a good week, quiet week to an extent. But before we get into the episode, as always, please make sure, if you haven't done so already, you make sure you go and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure you like the video and also go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and head over there, hit the notification bell. You won't miss an episode, and all our previous episodes are all there for you to listen back to as well. But let's go back to Monday night, which was a game which we kind of were semi-confident going into, with a couple of injuries for Newcastle. They dropped in form. We really needed a good performance off the back of the Brentford draw. And I feel like Pochettino really needed a win on Monday night because, you know, I think you was there telling me about the Brentford fan, the Chelsea fans, chanting with, you know, Jose Mourinho, Roman Abramovich was some of the chants as well. But yeah, let's talk about Newcastle, because I mean that was a difficult game for us to get through in terms of a result, but nonetheless 3 points on the table.
Yeah, no, good win. Especially when you look at where Newcastle are positioned in the league table and where we are as one of those teams that we want to steal 3 points off, and I guess it's closer to that potential 7th place Conference League position that I think is starting to look like more realistic, given that we play a lot of the teams ahead of us, the likes of Brighton, Spurs, and others, United even. But in terms of the actual game itself, I felt like it was one of those games that could have gone any way prior to kickoff, given how inconsistent we've been this season. I think Newcastle almost top us with inconsistency. They've beaten Arsenal, I believe, at St James's Park, and then they got and thrashed in the reverse leg, and they lost quite embarrassingly to other teams. So yeah, I was really kind of unsure how this game could have planned out. It could have been a 2-2. We could have beaten them 4-0. We could have lost 4-0. It could have gone either way, really. But in terms of the performance in itself, we scored early, which is always nice, calms the nerves. Good goal from Jackson. I thought it was a really clever flick. We haven't really spoken or given Jackson too much praise on his podcast recently, but I think he's actually upped his game recently, especially in that period in January. We were missing a number 9. He's come back in, filled that void. Big goal against Brentford, which was a brilliant header, almost Drogba-esque, and good flick against Newcastle. I do feel we were slightly lucky though, because Botman just had one of those days where he just didn't play well at all. First goal, poor clearance, and then the second goal for Cole Palmer goes right through his legs and kind of leaves the Dubravka a bit flat-footed. But yeah, there's still a lot of things we can work on. I believe the last goal, which we conceded from Jacob Murphy, I believe his name is, very avoidable. I think it's just a lapse in concentration from Cucurella in the last 5 minutes of the game, and then it's typical us. It leaves a relatively nervy finish when it shouldn't be. We should have just seen that game out at 3-1 up. But yeah, we got the 3 points. Another player I wanted to quickly talk about, Mudryk. Again, impact off the bench. He scored. I think now it's time that Pochettino really considers him in his match day squad for the next fixture, because every time he scored this season, there's that tweet we put up where he's been dropped when he was next available or for the next match day. So sure, I've been very critical of him throughout his time at Chelsea. I still believe that deserved criticism, given that his discipline, his body language, his antics off the field, his use of social media. But in this position, I just want to see him get a consistent run of games, especially when he's scoring. And arguably that was his best goal in the Chelsea shirt, I felt. When he snatched the ball off Gallagher, I jumped off my feet, about to swear at him. Then I think he managed to kind of quick feet, get past the Newcastle defenders, round Dubravka and slot it in. So yeah, really good goal. And it's not every day that you're 3-1 up this season. So it was an enjoyable game to watch. But yeah, like I said, still things we need to work on.
Yeah. I think those things that we need to work on definitely, at the moment anyway, 100% for me is defensively. I think when you're cruising almost in the game, you know, like you said, 3-1, and then it was a brilliant strike by Jacob Murphy to make it 3-2 in the 90th minute, I think it was also. But even so, I just looked at some of those defensive, and maybe this is down to the fact that, you know, Axel Disasi has been a bit infrequent this season, inconsistent, and Trevor Chalobah's missed a lot of football, or, you know, hasn't been played when he's been available to play as well. So I think for me personally, the defensive side of things still worries me a lot, especially when you go into a game, which we'll talk about later with Leicester. Those kind of things worry me, but it's just going forward, we look really good now. You know, I think, like you said, you know, Jackson has definitely, you know, taken the criticism on board. You know, took it on his shoulders, and he's trying to improve. You can see that as well. And like you said, he's getting into the right areas of the pitch now. You know, when we got him in the early part of the season, he was not making the right runs, or he was, you know, in a perfect opportunity, but was missing those opportunities. So he's definitely worked on something, or he's working on something, and it's paying off for him. You know, someone put up a tweet, I think it might have been yesterday or the day before, and it was, you know, which I hate to do, but they were comparing Didier Drogba's first season stats to Nicholas Jackson's, and they're not actually that far apart. You know, and you look at, we haven't finished the season yet. There's still some important games for Jackson to either match or even at possible beat, you know, what Didier Drogba done in the first season. And if you remember, Drogba in that season was very, I don't call him raw, but he wasn't the Drogba that left us. You know, he's a Drogba that improved over time and showed qualities over time, scored some very important goals. You know, you think back to Bayern Munich in the final. But Nicholas Jackson has definitely improved. And you're right about Mudryk. You know, we've both criticised him on here, but he's definitely someone that, for me, and I've said it I think a couple of times on here now, needs that consistency going forward, needs to be able to show us, you know, in a run of games that he can do what he done against Newcastle on Monday. I do want to talk about Raheem Sterling, because I feel that he is now the player that most likely will have to drop out of the team. If Mudryk is to come in and be given those opportunities to play consistently, I feel like it might be the right call to maybe give Sterling a rest. Maybe he's played a lot of football as well. We have to remember that. But he just doesn't seem like he's the player that we expect him to be at this part of his career, where he's meant to sort of, you know, galvanise the team, be one of those leaders, which we've spoken about on here before. But you'd expect if Mudryk is going to get those opportunities, it's going to be Raheem Sterling that drops out of the team.
Oh yeah, completely. I think other players in there, obviously Jackson's playing really well, like we just mentioned. Cole Palmer, another one who I think broke a record recently for the player with the most goals and assists combined in a game. So I think if you're looking at Sterling to be dropped, it still frustrates me slightly, because I still on Monday we had such a young squad, and Sterling was our only experienced player at 29. So it's whether you can kind of sacrifice a bit of experience to bring in another youth player. That being said, Mudryk looked good. He looked really good. And I think this is the stat I just found. So this is Mudryk under Pochettino. So scored that goal against Fulham. And then he was benched the next game against Burnley. Scored a goal against Arsenal. I believe we played again afterwards, but he was injured. So the next game he was fit in was the Spurs one, and he was benched again. Scored in a cup against Newcastle, was benched against Wolves. Scored against Palace, was benched the following match day against Luton. Scored against Leeds, was benched against Brentford. And now he scored against Newcastle. So it's time, I think, we start him against Leicester on Sunday. And like you said, I think Raheem Sterling would be the logical player to make way for Mudryk, given his form. Oh, he had a golden chance as well, Sterling, where he rounds the Dubravka and just takes a bit too long. And then I think it's Dan Burn clears it off the line. So yeah, I think if you base it on form right now, Sterling should be dropped.
Yeah, it's difficult for him, because I think he's obviously come in with the expectation that he's going to get a lot of game time. But when you're not putting in those numbers, or you're not putting in those performances where, you know, you're sort of living up to not just your price tag, but what the expectation from you is as a player, and then obviously what the fans' perspective is as well. If you're not living up to those, then it is hard to put you in the team week in, week out. And I think Mudryk still has a long way to go in terms of what we want from him, but he's definitely the one for me that should be given an opportunity, the fact you've just reeled that off in terms of, the inconsistencies that he's been given, it's probably not surprising that he's not finding the form, not being able to show us what he can do and why we've signed him for the price that we have. So I hope he does get this opportunity on Sunday to start against Leicester, which we'll talk about shortly. But he's got to be given the opportunities. Otherwise, you can't expect someone to be consistent with the lack of game time that he's getting.
Yeah, and I've watched a few YouTube videos of the Chelsea team squads, the likes of Levi Colwill, Chilwell, Ollie Gallagher, and they all mention Mudryk's name. It comes to the player that looks the sharpest in training, who's got the best shot, who's the quickest. So it's about time now we just see that consistent run of games for him on the pitch, and hopefully he'll be able to bring that form from the training ground on the pitch as well. And we've seen glimpses of it recently. So yeah, I'm really hoping he does start against Leicester and proves me wrong.
Yeah. Well, let's hope and pray. Just looking now while we're recording, we've been given the latest updates on injuries. So I'll start from the bottom and we'll work our way to the top for obvious reasons. But Ogunchukwu still out, still in the rehabilitation period with Nkunku, along with Lavia and Reece James and Wesley Fofana, Levi Colwill as well. Two key players back in team training now is Badia Shiel and Ben Chilwell, who has made the massive miracle of recovery, which I think you said it was like the malaria of, was it Drogba, I think, a couple of years ago with the malaria thing. I mean, it's crazy. He's back already. Ben Chilwell, back in training. There was reports early this week that he's going to be out for a long period of time, up to 3 to 4 months without football. But he's back in training. The social media post that Chelsea put out yesterday would appear that he is ready in contention to start against Leicester on Sunday. Been called up to Gareth Southgate's England squad as well for the upcoming fixtures, international level. I think I said it to you before, but this feels like an injury that is recurring, but also I feel like he's been rushed back into team training, maybe when he's not fully ready to do that. What's your thoughts on Chilwell so far coming back into the team?
I mean, it's good news for us because I think you sent it to me. You put this tweet out that I think it was this Simon Phillips?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
It was one of the, looks like the lengthiest injury he'll ever have at Chelsea, and it's the same recurring swelling that's come up. And we're thinking, oh shit, here we go again. He's going to be out for 5-6 months, whatever it will be. We will have him for the rest of the season. And it's clear that he still hasn't really been that same player since that injury against Juventus in 2021. So yeah, I was kind of upset. Then when I see that he's called up the Southgate squad, I'm thinking there must be some kind of miscommunication here. And then the pictures of him emerged at the training ground that he's training. So he clearly is fit. But like you said, it might come a bit too soon to throw him back into the squad on Sunday and also include him on international break where he's going to have to travel, he's going to have to train with the England team. And I think I also saw that Southgate selected Anthony Gordon, who also came off injured against Chelsea on Monday. So there's a bit of some controversial squad picks. Controversial in the way he's picked injured players and controversial in the way that he's picked some players that don't deserve to be there. But that's a topic for another day. But yeah, I'm pleased that he is fit though, because it's a player that we're going to need now, especially if we do end up beating Leicester and we go into the semis and hopefully the final of the FA Cup, because Cucurella's looked good at times at left back, but again, he's got that moment where he just switches off. Well, I don't know if his hair gets in his eyes or whatever it is. I think I'd much rather have Ben Chilwell. And like I always say, you want your captain on the pitch. And if you don't have your captain, you want your vice captain. And Chilwell is our vice captain. So it's good for us, but I would still take it easy. And hopefully Southgate takes it easy with him on international duty.
Yeah. It's a strange one because I feel like if we're going to get the best, very similar to Reece James, if we're going to get the best out of these players, I think we just have to give them the opportunity to recover properly. And I think with Reece James, he's done the right thing by, making sure he gives himself sufficient time to come back and hopefully give us a season next summer, after the summer break to play well. But Ben Chilwell for me is arguably our best left back at the club. You look at Cucurella, like you said, he's one of those players that will give you a 9 out of 10 and then give you 5, 3 out of 10s thereafter. So there isn't any consistency with him, which is worrying. The best, the most expensive left back, I think, in Premier League history. You expect that consistency from a player, but, just hasn't, again, someone who's kind of been in and out of the team, had his own injuries as well. But I mean, the worst thing we could probably do is send Ben Chilwell to play for England. I just think it for me, it just doesn't make sense. Even if someone is, 70, 80% fit, surely as a club, you'd want them to be fully fit for the club and the season ahead. And I get, it's a difficult choice for a player. You obviously want to represent your country, but, if a player's not fully fit, what's the logic in sending them to go and play? I think they're friendlies as well. I don't know if they're obviously not competitive matches, Brazil, Belgium, but it just doesn't make any sense why you'd want to send one of your players there to potentially, cause more damage to an injury that they've clearly got. That's an underlying issue. So it doesn't make much sense to me, if I'm honest.
No, I completely agree. Especially like you mentioned, it's friendlies, these games. There's not much to play for. I think there's still some more friendlies in June before the tournament starts. So if you really want to assess people's fitness, ability, that's when you start to pick your team or include them players that you want to take to the Euros with you. But this would have been an opportunity just to leave Ben Chilwell behind back Cobham, let him train in his own timeline, fully recover for the Burnley game in March. But then you're also hoping maybe Southgate and Pochettino and Chilwell himself have had conversations amongst each other, discuss his inclusion in the squad. But from a Chelsea fan perspective, you would have just hoped that he wouldn't get picked. On the other hand, pleased to see Palmer and Gallagher, because those two players really deserve it for their performances. And they've got a good fitness record. They rarely get injured, the two of them. So you're hoping that they'll be back end of March, ready to play that game against Burnley. But two well-deserved call-ups for the two of them.
Now you've mentioned it, one of the two is going to come back injured, isn't it? It's either Cole Palmer or Conor Gallagher. I think one of the two.
I'm touching wood here under the table. I'm touching my desk. So yeah, it's maybe I've jinxed it now, but you're hoping that the two of them will stay fit.
Yeah, definitely. Let's just quickly talk about Malo Gusto. I think I read last night that he's been left out of the French squad for France for the upcoming internationals as well. A player that for me has been, arguably, someone who could compete definitely with Reece James once he's fully fit for that right back spot at Chelsea. But right call maybe for international level. Do you reckon it's maybe? He's still relatively young. Do you think this is probably? We're talking about a player maybe in the next 2 or 3 years that will probably cement himself as the international right back for France.
Yeah, I think he's shown this season that he's ready to be called up for France, and a lot of the French national team players get called up when they're very, very young. You look at the likes of Pogba, Ousmane Dembele. I think they got their first call-ups when they were about 18, 19.
Yeah.
So I think he's ready to be called up to the Deschamps France squad. I think he's included in the France under 21 squad. So maybe there was some talks that the coach of that team wanted him there. But we spoke a lot about Palmer and Gallagher being a player of the seasons. I would actually include Gusto now in that conversation. He's been really, really good. And it's the fact we don't really talk much about Reece James' injury anymore goes to show how good Gusto's been. I think his ability to provide threat when we go up the pitch is brilliant as well. And defensively, he looks really good. He seems to regain the ball, especially when he's down low on the ground. Somehow he's just managed to stick out a foot and regain the ball. So he's a fantastic player. And I definitely feel like, again, maybe Deschamps, similar to Southgate's got his favourites ready in the squad. I've got the list of defenders that were selected here. Jonathan Klaus, Luka Hernandez, Theo Hernandez, Konate, Koundé, Pavard, Saliba, and Upamecano. So you're thinking maybe it's a Lucas Hernandez that plays right back, or maybe Koundé.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think definitely a player that can offer, I think, a bit more attacking threat than those two, perhaps at right back. But yeah, I think eventually, maybe not this Euros, but World Cup 2026, I'm definitely expecting him to be in that conversation, to be in the France squad. I saw an interesting tweet the other day, which is kind of worrying from a Chelsea perspective, is that Madrid might be in the market very soon for a right back, given the Carvajal's age. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to wonder, will they look at someone like Gusto, someone like Reece James?
I'd let Reece James go in a heartbeat. I know it sounds really horrible, but the reason I'd let him go is because he isn't fit enough. He isn't fit enough, and it's going to be. I don't want him to go at all. I don't want him to just leave the club. I think he could go down as one of the best Chelsea players we've ever had. But if he's constantly injured, it's one of those. You come to a point in someone's career where, as a club, you say, right, we need to let you go and cash in on you, and then we can hopefully, make Gusto number one. and then bringing another, substitute right back behind him. But if he's not fully fit for at least, 70, 80% of next season, I think there'll be massive questions about Reece James and whether, the fact that clubs might come knocking for him, do they refuse that, or do they let his fee drop down even more and get a lesser fee for him? So it's a difficult one for Reece James, but I think Gusto's there. If he carries on the way he's going, the trajectory that he's on, I think he'll definitely be someone that we can hopefully hold on to.
Agree, and it's a blessing for us to finally be able to have a good player. I want to still cover, I suppose, because Reece James is the captain, but a player that can really fill in and make us realise that we're not missing our beloved Reece James as much. If you remember last season, we were forced to play Azpilicueta at times, who looked like his legs were finished.
Yeah.
We were forced to change formation and then play with a back three and have Raheem Sterling sometimes our right wing back, which didn't work out well. So it's nice to finally be able to have a player like Gusto now, who really has hit the ground running at Chelsea, and he's got an exciting career ahead of him. He's only 21, I think. 20,
I know,
21.
yeah. This is what we forget.
20, yeah.
We forget how young he is. So he's got a long career ahead of him, hasn't he, really?
And we did beat a long list of clubs again. I think Inter Milan, Real Madrid all wanted his signing. We managed to sign him January last season, I believe. And then he stayed on loan at Lyon. And then we got him in the summer. So yeah, fantastic pickup.
Yeah. Just before we move on from the internationals, shout out to Noni Madueke, Carney Chukwemeka, who've both been called up to England's under-21 squad as well. So that's another sort of bonus for them, get some more game time under their belts, international level.
Petrovic called up for Serbia, I believe, as well. Trying to think if there's any other players. Sterling missed out for England.
Rightfully so.
I'm sure Enzo will be called up. But yeah, I think well deserved for both Carney and Madueke. And again, Carney, you're hoping didn't come back with an injury given his record.
Yeah, well, yeah, both of them as well, Madueke as well. Let's move on, because we found out a bit of news this week that we have now signed a new signee to Chelsea, not a new player, but a new coach, which is where we seem to be focusing our attention at the moment on in terms of recruitment. But we've decided to go for Brentford's Bernardo Cueva, I think his name is Cueva. I butchered his name, but so he's the Brentford set piece coach who joined, I think, in September 2020 from a club in, I think he's from Mexico, isn't he? I think he's a Mexican fellow who's joined us basically. He's done really well, I think, at Brentford. I'm messing this segment of the podcast up completely, aren't I? Let's start again. Let's start it all again. So we basically signed the coach, set piece coach from Brentford, who is currently there. He'll be there till the remainder of this season. He will join us in the summer. He's obviously done really well. I think I read a stat that Brentford have scored a lot of goals from set pieces, and it's one of the areas I know we've spoken about on here before, previously, that we struggle from set pieces in terms of corners and free kicks and scoring goals. Do you think that's maybe an area that, the owners have looked at and thought, or the technical director have realised, the coach as well, Pochettino, who's on board with this, has looked at and thought, we need to address this. And obviously Anthony Barry, who was massively part of that sort of coaching side, has gone to Bayern Munich now. So do you reckon this is one of those areas that you thought we need to get someone in and address this urgently?
Yeah, and I think going back to your first one, I think we just look so weak from set pieces compared to other teams. I think like many football fans, I watched the Liverpool City game last weekend, and John Stones' his opening goal from that corner, clever corner from De Bruyne.
Really,
and he just kind of goes in at the near post and slots it in. And that's something I watched and I thought, we don't have this in our locker to score a corner like that, take a corner like that. All of our corners from Madrid, Chilwell, whoever it is, they just can't even get past into the first post. So I think it was needed. And I got the stat here, is that with Bernardo Cueva as the set piece coach at Brentford are ranked second in set piece expected goals in the Premier League with 11.96, whilst Chelsea are sat in 18th with 6.93. So it just feels like we've gone to another team and like, you're doing really well here. We're going to nick your guy who's kind of contributing to this. And we're going to hope that the tables are turned afterwards, because we can't carry on with such an expected goal from set pieces. And like you said, corners, free kicks, all of those, we just haven't looked poor. I think the last goal from a corner I seem to remember us scoring was the consolation from Thiago Silva against Wolves which didn't mean much at the time. Can't really remember another headed corner. Or maybe Disasi. Actually, no, that wasn't a corner, was it? That was a cross.
It was a crossing.
So yeah, we need someone who can just help us from these dead ball situations, corners, free kicks. So yeah, I'm kind of excited for this appointment. But then it seems like we've appointed a lot of similar people in the last couple of years. We're during the Bowley era, but we haven't really seen the results. So that being said, excited for the time being, but hopefully it pays off next season.
I think it's definitely something that needed to be addressed. I know I said Anthony Barry was heavily crucial in the coaching department at Chelsea, and obviously now moved on to Bayern Munich. So it was an area that needed to be filled, definitely. Those stats that you just said there, it shows clearly that whatever they've been doing at Brentford has been working. The key thing is you have to have the right players to do that as well. And I think defensively, you think about set pieces, you think about your centre backs coming up for those. You think about when Van Dijk scores, when more John Stones, like you just mentioned, that late dart into the box. You need to make sure that the players are going to be able to buy into whatever these coaches are going to try and do with them. I feel like Villa maybe have got someone similar. They had someone similar at Villa that was doing such a good job there for Villa at one point. But let's just wait and see. I think it's one of those, isn't it, that until we see some results, some proof that it's working, then we can't really judge it or assess it. But for me, if it's going to help bring in more goals or, climb us up that table, especially in terms of the expected goals from set pieces, then I'm all for it. But I think we need to also not neglect that there's still a lot of issues, basic issues within that team that we haven't really addressed yet. And as I said, we need to, I think we need to see what players are here next summer and what players we bring in next summer as well. They have to be the right players, because if they're not, you could bring in some of the world's best players, but if they're not buying into what this set piece coach is trying to do, then it's kind of a really pointless appointment from a coaching perspective, in my opinion.
Completely, yeah. I think I saw something else that Bowley still wants to sign another 2 or 3 players in every position under the age of 23, which I think is really worrying, because that just seems like a massive gamble, signing all these youngsters from Ecuador, from Brazil, from France, and youngsters that are unproven, in the hope that 1 or 2 of them becomes the new Messi, Neymar, Vinicius, Mbappe. But it's a slim chance that happens. And I think we said it at length on this podcast that we need to start looking at more experienced players, proven Premier League players, rather than these youngsters from abroad.
Yeah.
So that's something else that I think is more of an something we need to address in the next couple of summer windows or transfer windows, rather than these kind of bringing in these specialists in certain areas on the training ground.
Yeah, it's interesting. Let's see how that pans out for us, because next season's going to be a crucial one. I think we'll get onto that in the summer when we take a break from the season. But let's move over to the FA Cup. I'm not going to say it, but it is a big game. It is a massive game for us. I think I said before we start recording, it's a bit of PTSD from the final a couple of years ago. Was it? I was trying to work out. It was Tielemans that handballed it, wasn't it? I think Tielemans handballed it.
I think it was. No, it was the other chap.
It was the other way around. It was.
I think Ayoze Perez handballed it in the build to the Tielemans goal.
It was Tielemans goal. I was trying. When I said to you, I was talking about it to someone. They couldn't remember either, and they were a Leicester fan. But yeah, I mean, obviously the Ben Chilwell goal that potentially should have stood as well. I think it was like 91 minutes into the game at the final. But Leicester are in really good form. Look at their championship form as well. They're a team that obviously is competing above and beyond in that aspect. But they're coming to Stamford Bridge. They're coming to a team where they haven't really had that level of quality, as so to speak, that they should be having week in, week out in the championship. This is a game we really ought to be winning and ought to be, in my opinion, putting out our best 11. International break coming up in the next couple of weeks or so. It's not really the time for me to rest or to tinker with the squad too much. But what's your thoughts going into it? Stamford Bridge, early kickoff as well. I think it's 1:45 kickoff. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we've clearly got history with Leicester in the FA Cup. Played them in the final 2021. I think that was my first game all season. I had all these empty seats around me because it was still COVID times. And then I think we played in quarterfinals the season before COVID again. Barkley got the winner. I think we played in 2012, 5-2 win, quarterfinals again. So it seems like it's written for us to beat them in the quarterfinals. Beat them in the quarterfinals in 2018. Pedro winner in extra time. And like you said, I think they're playing really well this season. Leicester, they're arguably more ready for the Premier League than teams like Burnley or Sheffield.
Yeah,
and they've got more quality in their squad than those teams. Unlucky to go down last season. I think it was just one of those, a bit of a blip of the season for them. But I think when they'll come back next season, they're a given for promotion. They'll come back next season and stay in the Prem. Looking at their recent results, though, I think they've dropped a bit of form. They drew with Hull on the 9th of March, beat Sunderland 1-0 on the 5th of March, lost QPR at home on the 2nd of March. So their last three games, 1 loss, 1 win, and one draw. So I think there's a bit of hope for us. I mean, there should be hope. We're playing at home against a championship team, but it's still not going to be easy. I'm expecting a tough game. And I'm really hoping that our win against Newcastle and the players that performed in that win against Newcastle just gives us a bit of a confidence or a spur and motivation. And we have to remember semi-finals next. That's another trip to Wembley. And that should motivate this disappointment end of February, that they can try to amend things with the fans and get a win again at Wembley. So yeah, big game, like you mentioned. Bit frustrating that the likes of Cassaday's cup tied.
Yeah.
Like that. So it could be an opportunity for a player like Chukwuemeka to make an appearance, I believe. Because I feel like it's at this stage of the season that Gallagher, Caicedo, Enzo, they've played a lot of football. Their legs are going to be tired. I still think the 3 of them should start together, given that we've got a 2-week break afterwards for the internationals. But yeah, it's going to be maybe a bit of a issue. Something for Pochettino to think about, whether he rotates, whether he plays the same 11 with Mudryk for Sterling that played against Newcastle, with the Silva slots back in for maybe Chalobah. Or if he's fit enough, does he play, or do you still kind of keep him on the bench, maybe give him 20 minutes, something like that, and you keep Cucurella into the team? So yeah, it's going to be interesting from a lineup perspective, from how Chelsea perform, how Leicester perform, but I'm just expecting a very tough game, possibly one that could go to extra time even.
Yeah, it's difficult because I think with Leicester, they've been heavily brilliant going forward in terms of their scoring. I think they've scored 74 goals so far in their championship this season. They've only conceded, I think, 30, maybe 36, 37. But we should be beating them. And I think that's the ultimate line at the end of everything I'm going to say, is that we should be beating them. We shouldn't really be struggling against them. Like you said, it's another possibility to play at Wembley in the semi-finals. I think Enzo Fernandez might be suspended for this game. I feel like he picked up.
Yes, you did tell me that yesterday.
Yeah, I think he picked up the yellow card against Leeds, which puts him out of this one. But look, Carney Chukwuemeka is a really good player. We know what he's capable of doing. Would I start him? No, I wouldn't. But I would definitely use him as an option off the bench. Defensively, we have to be spot on. I don't think defensively we can make any mistakes, because Leicester, attacking wise, as I just said, they're very sort of, on the ball with it. They're not going to come to Stamford Bridge and sit back. I think they'll be pressing us from the start, from the first kick of the ball. So we just have to be defensively switched on as a unit at the back, because if we're not, it's going to be, it could be an embarrassing scoreline as a Chelsea fan. But if we go on to beat Leicester, we go into the semis, we win the semis. I think we asked this question when it was in the Carabao Cup, and we said, will it be classed as a successful season if we went on to win a trophy? And I think we answered yes. Eventually, it might be, it's the biggest game of our season. If we go on to win the FA Cup, we get through all these hurdles first. Would you deem it as a successful season?
I'd say yes, actually, more so than how we won the Carabao Cup. Obviously, FA Cup's more prestigious, I believe, than the Carabao Cup.
Yeah,
doesn't have the name of an energy drink in it. That starts off.
Not yet. Give it time.
No, yeah, it's true. Yeah, and like I think I said, or maybe I kind of changed my mind around October, November time. But this is a very, very young squad. Yeah. So silverware for them would mean a lot. A defeat at Wembley, then a win at Wembley would mean a lot as well. And I would class it as successful. I think second or third, a younger squad in the Premier League. A lot of these players would learn a lot from this season, but if we can finish it with silverware for the fans who have been through a lot, not just in the last 2 seasons, but since the sanctions came in place the season before, March 2022, I think it will mean a lot. It would probably mean a trophy that would mean more than the FA Cups we've won previously, if anything. So yeah, I would class it successful. And this is when I'm going to ask you: does FA Cup give us any kind of entry into European competition, or?
I think it does.
Yeah, trying to think about that. I need to do some research after. So yeah, I would class it as a successful season given the circumstances we've been through in the last couple of years. And I actually just saw something. There'll be a familiar face in the Leicester dugout as their assistant manager. If you know who that is.
I actually don't.
No, former goalkeeper, Chelsea goalkeeper, Argentinian.
Oh, not Willie Caballero.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
He's their assistant manager. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Okay. Their manager's Argentinian, so they must be
it makes sense. Yeah,
their early football careers, but yeah,
okay.
So good to see him back.
Well, he'll know everything inside out. Inside knowledge on Chelsea.
It's a different Chelsea, though.
It is, but he'll know that. I mean, it's a good point. It is, but I think he'll know what to expect, won't he? I think the level of expectation it has dropped, but it shouldn't have. But I think he'll know what to expect going to Stamford Bridge. And to be honest as well, I mean, I'm just looking at potential Leicester lineup, Jamie Vardy, Dewsbury Hall, Harry Winks, and Ndidi, Vestergaard, Faz, Chowdhury, Justin. All of these players have played in the Premier League at some point,
Iheanacho. I think Iheanacho's still there, isn't he?
Iheanacho's still there. So, Leicester have been quite lucky in retaining a lot of their players that, they came down with from the Premier League. So none of them will be, fazed by the fact they're playing a Premier League team. This is a very good Leicester squad that should be, if we're honest, still being in the Premier League. So, we have to treat it like a normal 3 points game that we would play if we were playing them in the Premier League, and not think because they're in the Championship that they can just be rolled over, because I think it'd be the total opposite, if I'm honest, in the game. In terms of lineups, what's your thoughts on the lineup? Who would you start? We've spoken sort of a bit about Mudryk earlier, maybe replacing Raheem Sterling, but what would be the 11 you'd go with?
I think goalkeeper, it's a cup competition, and Sanchez is now looking like he's our cup keeper. So probably if he played in the Leeds game in the previous round, so maybe I'd go with Sanchez as the goalkeeper. Then I'd stick with Gusto right back. I'd actually go with Silva and Disasi as the centre-backs. If Chilwell is fit, and given he's an ex-Leicester player, he'll want to do well against his old team after all the stick he got from them for the celebrations in the FA Cup final. I'd actually go with Chilwell over Cucurella. It pains me to say it, but I would, even if he's not fully fit. But Cucurella scares me at times. He really does. Two midfielders, mentioned Enzo's suspension, so I'd go with Gallagher and Caicedo. Casaday's cup-tied, obviously, because he's played with Leicester in the FA Cup. But it could be an opportunity for Chukwuemeka. But I would actually, I think you sent me a kind of a draft of your one yesterday, and I think I would agree with Palmer as the 10, perhaps, with Jackson as the striker and Madueke and Mudryk as the two wingers.
Yeah. I'm not against your team at all. I think it's very similar, isn't it? I think the only difference might be Silva. I think I've gone for Trevor Chalobah. There's also Axel Disasi that potentially could play with Silva. But and Silva didn't play on Monday either. He was on the bench. So you'd think maybe this is a game you bring him into, but for the experience, if nothing else. But yeah, I think I went with Silva and Chalobah as my two centre backs. The rest of the team's the same. I would start Marc Cucurella. I'm sick of seeing players that we know we need back forced back into a team. They play 1 or 2 games, they come off injured again, and normally the injury that they pick up afterwards is the one that keeps them out for 3 months, 2 months. So if Ben Chilwell gets through the training session, which I'm assuming will be today or this afternoon as we're recording, I would definitely have him on the bench, and another option maybe to bring off the bench. If we need to change something defensively that just isn't working because of Cucurella, then you've got Ben Chilwell. But to start him, I think would be risky. Massive risk. And sometimes you got to take risk in football to win things. But I just think, I don't know.
It's just crossed my mind, but potentially as well, Gilchrist right back, Gusto left back. if we don't really trust him.
That would worry me more. That worries me more, just because I think, and I love Gilchrist. I think he's such a brilliant footballer, but I just think he reminds me of Conor Gallagher 2 seasons ago, who's just out to impress and really wants to impress, and that's brilliant. But I think you also run the risk of picking up an early yellow, so then it kind of nullifies how you can play the game. If you I'm trying to think who'd probably play on the left for Leicester, but whoever it is, gives them an open opportunity just to keep running past you because you can't do anything about it. So that worries me a little bit more. Brilliant player, but he's eager to impress, I think, which is not a bad thing. But I don't think I could play Chilwell. I think I'd be more worried playing a 50, 60, 70% fit Chilwell than 100% Cucurella. I think he can give you that 9 out of 10. But we might get a 3 out of 10 as well.
And goalkeeper, would you agree with Sanchez for this one, or would you stick with Petrovic?
No, sorry, I didn't know. Yeah, sorry about another difference. I would stick with Petrovic. I think with these kind of things, if we were playing in like the Champions League or Europa as well, then yeah, I might switch it. But this 1 game a week thing for me, it's one goalkeeper and stick with him. I think, we talk about consistency in other areas of the field, but goalkeeper is just as important to make sure that they stay consistent and they, you stick with the goalkeeper that you want to try and win something with. And Petrovic has done no wrong for me we lost, we let in 2 goals, but one of them, I think Murphy's goal, you could have had Petrovic and Sanchez in that goal, and I think they both wouldn't have saved it. So, no, I'd stick with Petrovic, keep him in goal. Unfortunate for Sanchez, but sometimes when you get injured, you do lose your place, especially as a goalkeeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I'll stick with Sanchez because he'd be our cup goalkeeper going forward.
Yeah,
actually stay at the club and for the remainder of the season. But I do agree the kind of 1 game a week thing maybe makes you think maybe you should stick with Petrovic. But I'll go with my initial lineup and stick with Sanchez though.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know what you think on the podcast as well. If you're on Spotify, you can add comments, I believe, on there now. So make sure you give us your thoughts, your lineups, your score predictions as well. Should we progress through the next rounds of the FA Cup? Can we go all the way to win it and end the season on some sort of high after a very turbulent 18 months at Chelsea? Just before we wrap up, Theo, score lines, predictions, what are we going for?
I think there's been a recurring theme of extra time and penalties in the last few weeks. So I'm going to go with a 2-1 Chelsea win, but after extra time. So someone on Chelsea will get a winner in extra time.
I'm confident going into this game. I've seen enough against Newcastle to let me think that we will play well. I'm thinking back to the Leeds game, the second half, where we played relatively okay. The Villa game, where we dominated Villa. In that round as well. So I just think there's times where we can switch flick a switch and just play really well. So I'm going to go with the same scoreline 2-1, but I think in 90 minutes, I think we'll be able to see the game out. And I think tactically substitutions will be so crucial in this game. So Pochettino has to get that right as always, but definitely in a game against Leicester, because again, they will have just as good a bench as ours, if not better. And they can bring on players that might affect the game better than ours can. So we have to see the game out.
Cool. Yeah. I'd be happy with 90 minutes, a win in 90 minutes.
I think we all would.
It'd be more calming. Yeah. Yeah. I like going to the game, obviously. So if I can get it done in 90 minutes, the better. Yeah.
Last thing though, early kickoffs. I'm not a big fan of them.
No. It's on a Sunday though. So.
Nah, it's still the same. I think these early kickoffs, I don't know why. And I feel like we've got a really poor record when it comes to that, but yeah, we've got to be able to perform and play well, and just get into the next round, in my opinion.
Agree. Yeah. And last little thing I'll say before we wrap up is the player on the back of my shirt had 2 stints at the club. That's my last clue.
Surely it's got to be Lampard then. Oh, no, he had 1 stint. Drogba.
I'm not saying anything else. Yeah. I'll let the listeners guess. Guess.
We'll be back. You've got a week, listeners, to guess. He's on the back of Theo's shirt. Again, comments on YouTube, on Spotify. I believe you can put comments there, so make sure you leave them for next week, and all will be revealed. But thank you very much for listening. Have a good weekend. Let's hope we get into the next round of the FA Cup, and we'll be back next week. So thank you very much.